You are not behind. The Zen art of letting go of your life's map. Chapter 1. The architecture of uncertainty. We have all stood there in the middle of a mundane errand, perhaps in the fluorescent-lit aisle of a supermarket, surrounded by choices that ultimately do not matter, and felt the sudden, crushing weight of an existential why. You look at the others, the ones who seem to be gliding through life with a mapped-out precision, and a familiar, gnawing fear takes root. It is the fear that you have missed the instructions, that you are wandering off the grid, that you are, in the harshest terms, behind. But let us hold that feeling with the tenderness of a scientist observing a rare specimen. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are standing exactly where the history of human wisdom says, you must stand before the real work begins. To be lost is not a failure, it is a prerequisite. There is a profound, albeit uncomfortable, beauty in this sensation of being adrift. It is the moment when the structures you have relied upon, the career path you painstakingly charted, the identity you built in your 20s, the expectations you absorbed from your upbringing begin to dissolve. When the path ahead vanishes, you are forced to look at the ground beneath your feet. You are forced to notice the air you are breathing, the way the light falls across your hands, the texture of the present moment. This is not a detour, it is the path itself. Countless wise beings have stood exactly where you are. The Buddha himself spent 6 long years wandering the forests and riverbanks, searching for an answer that his royal lineage and ascetic practices could not provide. He was, by all accounts, completely lost. He had tried the extreme of indulgence and the extreme of self-mortification, and both left him empty. It was only when he surrendered his desperate need to find a final, permanent solution that the truth finally emerged, not as a conclusion, but as an awakening the greatest Zen masters have long spoken of. Don't know mind as the ultimate doorway to reality. We are so obsessed with having the right answers, with constructing a life that looks coherent from the outside, that we have become terrified of the I don't know. Yet, in that confession of ignorance, there is a liberation. When you no longer pretend to know exactly where you are going, you are finally free to notice where you actually are. You are no longer performing a version of yourself, you are simply existing. Consider the possibility that your confusion is not a problem to be solved, but a crack in the armor where light gets in. The heaviness you feel is the weight of old beliefs, cultural scripts that insist you should have reached specific milestones by specific ages. These scripts are not laws of nature, they are stories. And when the stories no longer fit the reality of your evolving soul, the feeling of being lost is simply the psyche's way of saying, it is time to discard the script. There is something deeply grounding about recognizing that we are scattered across the world, navigating different lives, yet feeling this exact same human uncertainty. You are not navigating this wilderness alone. You are part of an ancient lineage of seekers who realized that the solid ground they were reaching for was, in fact, fluid. Take a moment if you can. Find a comfortable spot. Settle into the space you occupy. This is not a race to fix yourself in the next hour, or the next day, or even the next month. This is an invitation to explore the gentle, quiet wisdom that has guided humans through the storms of life for over 2,000 years. It is an invitation to see that the very place where you feel most adrift might be the most honest place to begin your true journey. Why must we believe that by 30 or 40 or 50, we should have the map complete? When you were a child, no one measured your worth by your long-term output. You were allowed to be curious, to be messy, to change your mind 1,000 times before dinner. Somehow, as we aged, we internalized the idea that life should be a linear progression toward a fixed horizon. But life is not a straight line. It is a spiral. It returns us to similar themes, similar questions, and similar confusions. But each time we arrive at that place of uncertainty, we are equipped with a deeper capacity for presence. You have been carrying a weight that was never yours to hold. The burden of having it all figured out is a foundational lie that our achievement-obsessed society perpetuates. It suggests that a human being is a machine that should function at maximum efficiency, following a predictable trajectory. But you are not a machine. You are a natural phenomenon, like the tide, like the growth of a forest, like the cycle of the seasons. You have your own rhythm. There is a profound humility in admitting you do not know where you are going. It is the humility of a finite being standing in an infinite cosmos. To assume that your individual mind could have already mapped out the rest of your existence is in many ways an act of supreme arrogance. It implies that you can control the unpredictability of a universe that is constantly unfolding in ways you cannot possibly foresee. What if you let go of the struggle? What if, instead of fighting the feeling of being lost, you leaned into it? What if, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you began to ask, "What is this moment trying to show me?" You are not falling apart. You are falling together in a new way, shedding the outdated patterns that no longer serve your growth. This is the beginning of an authentic path. The map you were given was wrong, but the terrain you are standing on is exactly where you need to be. Breathe into that. You are here, you are breathing, and for now that is enough. Chapter 2. The mythology of the mapped life. Why do we carry the weight of an itinerary that was never ours to write? We have been seduced by a pervasive cultural mythology which suggests that a life well lived is a life that is pre-calculated. We are conditioned from our earliest years to believe that life is a series of strategic maneuvers, a race to be won, a checklist to be completed, a monument to be erected by a certain age. We are told that by 25, we should have the professional trajectory set by 35, the foundations of stability cemented by 50, the wisdom of a seasoned expert. This internal clock, this phantom deadline that hums in the back of our menses, the primary engine of modern anxiety. We look at our contemporaries and measure our progress against their curated facades. We compare our behind-the-scenes chaos with their highlight reels, and we inevitably conclude that we are failing. We have internalized the bizarre, damaging expectation that human existence should be a linear progression toward a fixed horizon. But look closely at this framework. Is it rooted in truth, or is it merely a construct of an achievement-obsessed culture? Consider the child of 5. When they sit at the dinner table, no one asks them for their 5-year plan. They are not expected to justify their existence through measurable outcomes. They are simply allowed to exist in what Zen practitioners call don't know Minda state of pure, open-ended presence. Yet as we transition into adulthood, we replace that innocence with an obsessive need for certainty. We believe that if we can just plan enough, control enough, and know enough, we can insulate ourselves from the inherent fluidity of being human. Buddhism offers a perspective that is profoundly radical in this context. The realization that the suffering we feel is not caused by the lack of a plan, but by the desperate, clawing hunger for solid ground in an inherently fluid universe. We are trying to build a castle of certainty on a foundation of shifting sands, and we are perpetually heartbroken when the tide as it must comes in to reclaim the space. We mistake our plans for reality, forgetting that a plan is merely a mental sketch, a shadow on the wall, not the landscape itself. The tragedy of the mapped life is that it blinds us to the present. When you are frantically looking at the horizon, trying to see what lies 3, 5, or 10 years ahead, you are no longer stepping firmly on the path beneath your feet. You are missing the subtle shifts in the light, the unexpected detours that lead to genuine joy, and the quiet beauty of the current moment. You are treating your life as a project to be completed rather than a mystery to be experienced. This is the damaging lie our society perpetuates, that we are supposed to have it all figured out. It suggests that confusion is a malfunction, that drifting is a form of laziness, and that being lost is an indictment of your character. But what if the opposite were true? What if the feeling of being lost is actually a sign of deep, intellectual and spiritual honesty? It means you are finally refusing to perform a version of yourself that never quite fit. It means you are no longer willing to live a life built on the foundations of other people's expectations. Think about the last time you felt genuinely, deeply peaceful. I am willing to wager that it was not in a moment when you had every detail of your future perfectly mapped. It was likely a moment of total presence, perhaps watching the way the late afternoon sun filters through tree leaves, or laughing with a friend until your ribs ached, or simply breathing without an agenda. In those moments, you were not the responsible one, the successful professional, or the person who has it all together. You were just a human being, existing in the vast, uncluttered space of the now. Peace does not come from knowing where you are going. It comes from being comfortable with where you are. It comes from the recognition that this moment confusion, uncertainty, and Alice already complete. Your uncertainty is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of courage. It is the brave act of dropping the facade. When you look at your life through the lens of this ancient wisdom, the cultural pressure to have a perfect map begins to lose its grip. You start to see that the bizarre expectation of knowing your entire existence by 30 or 50 is exactly that. Bizarre, we are dynamic, changing systems. We are rivers, not rocks, and a river does not need a map to find the sea, it only needs to trust the current. The next time the pressure to have it all figured out begins to tighten in your chest, take a breath and remember, you are not a project to be finished. You are a story being told, and the best stories are the ones that wander. Chapter 3. The Zen of the Don't Know Mind. In the Zen tradition, there is a concept that serves as a vital antidote to our obsession with certainty, the don't know mind. It is often considered one of the most precious things a human being can cultivate. To the modern, achievement-driven mind, this phrase sounds dangerous, perhaps even reckless. We have been taught that not knowing is a deficiency, a lack of intelligence, a failure of preparation, or a sign of weakness. But in the landscape of wisdom, don't know is not a confession of ignorance. It is the ultimate clearing of the slate. When you operate from a place of knowing, you are essentially living in the past. You are filtering every new experience through the lens of what you have already learned, what you have already decided, and what you have already categorized. The expert mind is a closed loop. It says, I have seen this before, I know how this works, and I know exactly what the outcome will be. While this can be useful for technical skills or logistical tasks, it is devastating for the art of living. It shuts the door to the infinite possibilities of the present moment. You view the world not as it is, but as you have already defined it to be. To cultivate don't know mind is to step into the clearing. When you admit that you do not know the ending to your own story, you are finally free to write the next sentence with genuine authenticity. This is the moment when curiosity replaces judgment. This is the moment when you cease to be a performer of your own life and start being a participant. When you approach a relationship, a career challenge, or even a moment of existential crisis with don't know, you are essentially saying to the universe, I am open to the truth of this moment, regardless of whether it matches my previous assumptions. But let us be honest about why this feels so threatening. We live in a culture that mistakes activity for progress, plans for wisdom, and certainty for strength. We are terrified that if we stop knowing, we will simply stop moving. We fear that if we admit we don't know where we are going, we will inevitably drift into disaster. Admitting you don't know where you are going can feel like admitting failure. Yet, if you look back at the most meaningful turns in your life's relationships that changed your soul, the moments of profound breakthrough, the unexpected opportunities that altered your trajectory, how many of them were the result of a rigid 5-year plan? Almost all of them likely emerged from periods of uncertainty, from what you might have called being lost at the time. Steve Jobs once remarked that you can only connect the dots looking backward. When he took a calligraphy class for fun, he had no idea it would eventually revolutionize digital typography. When he was fired from his own company, it felt like the end of the world, yet it led to his most innovative work. What looked like a detour, what felt like being lost, was actually the path itself, unfolding in ways that the expert mind could never have predicted. When you are in don't know mind, you are not constantly defending outdated beliefs about who you should be. You are not exhausting yourself trying to maintain an image that never quite fit anyway. You are free to respond to life as it actually unfolds, rather than as you think it should unfold. This creates space for something beautiful to emerge. Curiosity instead of judgment. Openness instead of resistance. It is the kind of presence that allows you to notice opportunities you would have missed while frantically trying to execute a rigid plan. Consider the fisherman in the ancient Taoist story. He is drifting in the mist when another boat slams into him. He is filled with immediate, righteous anger, ready to scream at the careless person who ruined his morning. But when the mist clears, he sees the other boat is empty. It has simply broken free from its mooring. His anger dissolves instantly. There is no one to blame. Life is often like that. We are hit by circumstances, by people who disappoint us, by sudden turns of fate, and we immediately create a story of why me or who is to blame. But what if those boats are also empty? What if the circumstances that disrupt our plans are not personal attacks, but simply the currents of life moving through us? Don't know mind is not ignorance, it is the wisdom to recognize the limits of what any individual mind can truly grasp about the complexity of existence. When you drop your opinions, when you stop trying to force reality to match your expectations, you start to see that your confusion is actually a sign of intelligence. It is the intelligence of a person who is no longer willing to settle for a life that is too small, too predictable, and too disconnected from the truth. Take a breath and let the need to know settle for a moment. You don't need to know the answer to your life today. You only need to be present enough to take the next honest step. That in itself is the highest form of knowing. Chapter 4. The 10 Bulls and the Architecture of Awakening. The ancient parable of the 10 bulls is far more than a set of Zen instructions. It is the definitive non-linear map of the human soul. For over 1,000 years, it has served as a mirror for those who feel lost, showing them that the journey of finding oneself is not a detour, but the very process of awakening. The bull in the story represents your authentic self, that essential, vibrant core of your being that has been buried under layers of conditioning, societal expectations, and the relentless pressure to be someone you thought you were supposed to be. The journey begins not with a clear path, but with a realization of loss. In the first stage, searching for the bull, you feel the gnawing emptiness of a life that no longer resonates. Perhaps you have achieved the milestones you were told would bring happiness, yet you wake up each morning with a hollow sensation, wondering if this is truly all there is. This is the quarter life, midlife, or existential crisis, the moment you realize you are performing a role in a play you never auditioned for. The herder wanders through forests and valleys calling out, hearing only the echo of his own confusion. This stage is messy and often painful, but it is the critical awakening of longing. You are finally honoring the truth that your current life is too small for who you are becoming. The second stage, finding the tracks, occurs when you stop looking for the bull and start looking for the signs of your own authenticity. You begin to notice the breadcrumbs. Maybe you realize you feel most alive when you are working with your hands, even though your corporate job demands abstract logic. Maybe you notice that certain conversations light you up while others drain your soul. These are the tracks. They show up as recurring dreams, sudden flickers of interest in long-forgotten hobbies, or moments when you feel a strange sense of home in a new environment. You are becoming a detective of your own reality, learning to track what energizes you versus what depletes you, what aligns with your values versus what you do out of sheer obligation. Then comes the breakthrough of the third stage. Seeing the bull, suddenly the fog of conditioning lifts. It might happen in the middle of a mundane task in nature, or during a moment of deep silence. You catch a glimpse of who you really are beneath the mask. For one blissful, unfiltered moment, you recognize that you are not the voice in your head, but the awareness that hears it. It is a moment of profound recognition. This is me. This is who I am when I am not trying to be anyone. But the parable warns us, seeing the bull is not the same as catching it. Many seekers get stuck here, chasing peak experiences and trying to recreate that one moment of clarity. They hop from workshop to teacher, hoping to feel that wow again. But the truth is that the glimpse was merely a preview. Your authentic self is real, but it requires courage to integrate that glimpse into the messy reality of your daily life. In the fourth stage, catching the bull, the real wrestling begins. You have seen your true nature, but your conditioned self, the part of you that craves safety, conformity, and external validation, does not want to let go. This stage is marked by internal and external resistance. You try to live from your authenticity, but your family, your career, and your social circles may push back. You might find yourself sabotaging your own progress because the new you feels unfamiliar and risky. Mark, a software engineer who felt the pull to leave a stable career for teaching, described this as panic at the threshold. Every time he moved toward his truth, he felt a pull back toward his old, safe identity. The remedy here is right effort, the delicate balance between forcing change and giving up entirely. You are learning to stay committed to your truth while honoring the complexity of your human history. Gradually, You move into the fifth stage, taming the bull. The wild energy of your authentic self begins to cooperate with the practicalities of your life. You are no longer at war with yourself, forced to choose between who you are and who you think you should be. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means you develop the skill of navigating the tension between authenticity and practicality. You learn to show up more honestly in your existing relationships and to approach your responsibilities with a new spirit. Lisa, an accountant who found a love for writing, did not quit her life overnight. She integrated her creative self into her mornings. She started saying no to draining commitments and yes to what fed her spirit. She was taming the bull by making small, consistent choices that aligned her outer life with her inner truth. As you move through these stages, you realize that the struggle itself was the training. You are not going in circles, you are spiraling. Each return to confusion is simply an invitation to see the bull from a different, deeper angle. The journey is not about reaching an end point. It is about the courage to stay with the search until the searcher and the sought become one. You are not failing by feeling lost. You are simply in the middle of a very old, very beautiful, and very necessary transformation. Chapter 5: The Ecology of Karma. We often misunderstand the concept of karma, viewing it as a cosmic scoreboard, a stern judge tallying our mistakes and handing down retribution in the form of bad luck or hardship. We think of it as what goes around, comes around in the most punitive, transactional sense. But in the deep, psychological tradition of Buddhism, the word karma simply means action. It is not a system of punishment. It is the most sophisticated map of cause and effect ever developed to explain the landscape of a human life. It traces the subtle, invisible threads that connect your past thoughts, habits, and choices to the reality you are experiencing right now. When you feel stuck in a recurring pattern, attracting the same type of conflict, hitting the same wall of self-doubt, or finding yourself paralyzed at the same crossroads, you are not being punished. You are simply witnessing the harvest. You are seeing the fruit of seeds that were planted long ago, perhaps by a version of you that was merely trying to survive, protect itself, or earn approval. Think of your mind as an internal garden. Some of the seeds were planted by your environment, your upbringing, and the cultural scripts you adopted before you even knew you had a choice. Perhaps you learned early on that being perfect was the only way to avoid criticism. You planted a seed of perfectionism. Maybe you learned that expressing your needs was dangerous. You planted a seed of self-diminishment. Over the years, these seeds took root. They grew into the automatic reactions, the defense mechanisms, and the autopilot behaviors that now seem to define your personality. The gardener's frustration in the ancient parable reminds us of this. She tended her exotic plants with great care, yet one bush remained sickly. She added more water, more fertilizer, more light, but nothing changed. Finally, she dug deep into the soil and found an old, restrictive binding, a piece of cloth wrapped around the roots years before, intended to protect the plant during transplanting. It had served a purpose once, but it had now become a prison. Your recurring patterns are that old binding. They were once intelligent adaptations, designed to keep you safe when you were vulnerable. But they have outlived their usefulness and are now constricting your growth. When you realize this, you stop blaming yourself. You stop looking at your flaws as evidence that you are fundamentally broken. Instead, you begin to act as an archaeologist of your own experience. You start to ask, with curiosity rather than condemnation, what was this pattern trying to protect me from? This is the shift from unconscious reactivity to conscious participation. When you observe a pattern, say, a tendency to procrastinate or a habit of people-pleasing, you stop judging it as a moral failure. You observe it like a scientist observing a natural phenomenon. You look at it with interest. You notice how it feels in your body. You see the logic behind it. When you understand that your patterns made sense given the conditions that created them, the shame begins to dissolve, and where shame dies, compassion grows. This is the true power of karmic understanding. You realize that you are not just a victim of your past conditions, you are the active cultivator of your future. Every moment is an opportunity to plant a new seed. When you choose awareness over reactivity, when you pause before snapping at someone, when you breathe through the impulse to self-criticize, When you speak your truth, even when your voice shakes, you are planting seeds of mindfulness and authenticity. These seeds do not sprout overnight. One of the hardest lessons in this journey is the reality of slow growth. You cannot force a flower to bloom by pulling on its stem. You can only provide the conditions for it to flourish. Your inner landscape changes through consistent, small, conscious choices repeated over time. But there is a deeper freedom here. You stop needing your past to have been different. You stop needing to blame your parents, your culture, or your early circumstances for the patterns you are working with. Not because those influences weren't real, but because blame keeps you trapped in the past, while understanding allows you to work skillfully with the present. You begin to accept that you cannot control every condition that affects your growth, but you can control how you meet those conditions. You are moving from a state of being a passive recipient of your history to becoming a collaborator with life itself. Your challenges do not disappear, but they become workable material fertilizer for the next season of your growth. You are no longer just a person struggling with confusion. You are a person actively clearing the soil, loosening the old bindings, and making space for a new, authentic version of yourself to emerge. This is the work of a lifetime, and it begins with the simple, humble realization that you are the gardener of your own soul. Chapter 6: The Bamboo and the Art of Emptiness. There comes a moment in the life of every seeker when they stand before a mirror and realize that the person staring back, the one they have spent years defining, perfecting, and protecting, no longer feels like a solid truth. It is a terrifying realization. You look at your reflections, the roles you play, the labels you wear, the narrative you have woven about your past. Suddenly, it all feels like a costume that has grown too tight. A story that is no longer being told by you, but is instead telling you. Many of us react to this feeling with panic. We double down on our identity. We grip the reins of our personality even tighter, desperate to prove that we are still the responsible one, the successful one, or the person who has it all together. But the more we grasp, the more we suffer. We are trying to hold on to water, and the harder we squeeze, the faster it slips through our fingers. This is where the Buddhist teaching of Shunyata, often translated as emptiness, offers the most radical freedom imaginable. It is not a nihilistic void. It does not mean you don't exist, or that your life is meaningless. Instead, it is an invitation to recognize that you are not a fixed, static object. You are not a statue carved from stone. You are a process. You are a symphony, a river, a flickering flame. When you look closely at your body, your thoughts, and your emotions, you find that none of them remain the same for 2 consecutive moments. Cells die and are reborn. Thoughts arise and vanish like clouds. And even the self you talk to in your mind is constantly morphing, based on the context of your day. The story of the oak and the bamboo illustrates this better than any philosophical lecture. The oak was proud of its solidity. It boasted of its thick, unyielding trunk and its ability to withstand the gale by refusing to move. It identified with its strength, its permanence, its known-ness. But when the massive storm swept through the valley, the oak's refusal to bend became its downfall. Because it could not change its shape, it snapped. The bamboo, by contrast, seemed frail. It had no thick trunk to boast about. But when the winds howled, the bamboo surrendered. It bent until its top nearly touched the earth. It danced with the wind, allowing the pressure to pass through its hollow center rather than resisting it. When the storm subsided, the bamboo stood upright, unharmed, renewed. True resilience is not about being unmovable, it is about being responsive. When you understand the emptiness of a fixed identity, you gain the bamboo's grace. You stop needing to be a type of person. You stop needing to defend a static image of who you are. This is an immense relief. Think of the energy you waste every day maintaining your reputation, defending your positions, or worrying about whether your actions align with a self-concept you formed a decade ago. It is an exhausting, full-time job that yields no profit. When you hold your identity lightly, you discover a profound fluidity. You can be serious when the situation calls for gravity, and deeply playful when the moment invites lightness. You can be confident when you possess knowledge, and entirely humble when you do not. You no longer fear betraying your past self because you recognize that the past is a memory and the future is a dream, only the present is real. Practicing this is surprisingly simple. Take a label you often use: I am an introvert. I am bad at conflict. I am a perfectionist, and shift the language. Instead of saying I am, try saying I have tended to be this way in the past. That small grammatical shift creates a world of space. It turns a prison cell into a living room. You are acknowledging your history without making it your destiny. You are honoring the pattern while keeping the door open for something entirely new to emerge. This is the freedom of emptiness. When you are not solid, you cannot be broken. When you are not fixed, you cannot be stuck. You are no longer a project to be finished, but a space to be inhabited. Like the bamboo, you maintain your essential nature, your values, your kindness, your presence while expressing it through the fluid, dynamic movement of life. The storm will come again, it always does. But you will no longer meet it with the rigidity of the oak. You will meet it with the responsiveness of the bamboo, finding that in your emptiness you are finally, truly full. Chapter 7. The Spiral of Awakening. Life has a way of bringing the same challenges back to your door, doesn't it? Just when you think you have mastered a lesson, healed a wound, or finally moved past an old pattern, something remarkably similar shows up again. Perhaps it is a new person who triggers the exact same insecurity, or a situation that forces you back into a fear you thought you had outgrown. Your first instinct is often one of defeat. Here we go again. I thought I was past this. Did I learn nothing? But what if these recurring difficulties are not evidence of failure? What if they are actually the most profound proof of your progress? Buddhism reframes this experience through the concept of the spiral. We often mistake our growth for a straight line or a circle, expecting that if we have arrived, we should never have to deal with the same problem twice. But life is not a circle that traps you, it is a spiral that lifts you. Think of a spiral staircase. As you climb, you face the same direction multiple times, passing the same windows and the same landmarks. From the outside, it might look like you are going in circles, but from your perspective on the stairs, you can see that each revolution takes you to a new level. The view expands. The air is clearer. You are seeing the same themes: loneliness, ambition, fear, desire. You are meeting them from a higher vantage point, armed with all the wisdom you gathered during the previous revolution. When you were 20, the searching felt like a desperate, frantic scramble. At 40, that same searching feels like a contemplative, conscious journey. You are still looking for the same truth, but the person looking is vastly different. This is how healing actually works. You do not overcome your deepest patterns once and for all in a single dramatic breakthrough. You meet them again and again, each encounter offering a deeper layer of integration. This brings us to the inevitable visitor known in Buddhist lore as Marath, inner adversary. Mara is the voice of doubt, the surge of fear, and the shadow of cynicism that appears right as you are making progress. When you decide to finally live your truth, Mara is there to whisper you aren't qualified, or it's too late, or everyone will laugh. Many try to fight this voice. They try to silence it, ignore it, or shame it into submission. But resistance only feeds the fire. The ancient Tibetan practice of inviting your demons to tea suggests a radically different approach. It is not about indulging in negativity. It is about choosing curiosity over combat. The next time a difficult emotion, anxiety, doubt, or frustration shows up, do not push it away. Imagine pulling up a chair and saying to that emotion, "I see you, you are part of my experience. What do you need me to understand?" When you stop treating your inner adversaries as enemies to be destroyed, they reveal themselves as messengers. Anxiety is often an alarm system for values you are afraid of violating. Sadness is frequently a container for love that has nowhere else to go. Anger is often a boundary guard warning you that your integrity is being compromised. When you listen to these messengers, they lose their power to control you. They transform from demons into allies. This is the art of dancing with difficulty. It is not about loving the pain, it is about trusting the intelligence of your own unfolding. The storms that sweep through your life, losses, the sudden changes, the moments of feeling lost are not happening to you. They are happening through you as a natural part of the ecology of your growth. Consider the farmer in the village who lived through a devastating drought, while everyone else boarded their windows and hid in terror of the thunderstorms. She stood on her porch watching them with calm reverence. When the rains finally broke the drought and the land turned green, The neighbors finally understood. The storm was not the enemy. Their fear of the storm was the enemy. Their resistance was what prevented them from seeing the rain as a gift. When the next wave of difficulty arrives, step out onto the porch. Stop trying to find the perfect shelter. Stand with the uncertainty. Trust that what feels like chaos might actually be the clearing that makes space for something new to take root. You are not going in circles. You are climbing. Every return to the familiar territory of your struggle is an invitation to meet yourself with more compassion, more presence, and more profound understanding. You are not failing. You are ascending. Chapter 8. The Threshold of Noble Silence. We have explored the mind, the patterns of our karma, the fluidity of our identity, and the spiral of our awakening. Yet there comes a point in every sincere search for meaning where the map itself begins to fail. You have read the books, analyzed your childhood, mapped your triggers, and attempted to think your way to enlightenment. You have built a sophisticated internal language to describe your state, but you find that the deeper you go, the less your words seem to suffice. This is not a failure of your progress. It is the inevitable destination of the path. Buddhism speaks of this as noble silence. It is not the silence of someone who has nothing to say, but the silence of someone who has finally touched something too profound to be captured by the limitations of human speech. When you reach this threshold, your intellectual constructs begin to feel like trying to hold the ocean in a teacup. You may feel like you are losing your footing, that your spiritual progress is stalling because you can no longer explain what is happening to you. On the contrary, you are merely moving from the level of description to the level of direct experience. Think of the moments in your life when language felt most inadequate, when you held a newborn child, or watched the sun set over an horizon that seemed to stretch into eternity, or sat in the presence of someone you loved deeply in those moments. If you had tried to describe what you were feeling, the experience itself would have diminished. Any attempt to turn that raw, electric truth into a sentence would have stripped it of its life. Noble silence is the practice of resting in that inadequacy without needing to fix it. It is the wisdom to stop seeking and start noticing what is already here. We live in a culture that is addicted to the noise of answers. We assume that if we can just define our problems, we can solve them. But some questions are not meant to be answered, they are meant to be lived. When you stop filling the gaps between your thoughts with commentary, a remarkable stillness begins to emerge. It is like a glass of water that has been stirred for years. If you simply set it down and leave it alone, the silt eventually settles to the bottom, revealing a clarity that was always there, waiting beneath the agitation. Maria, a seeker who spent years flitting from therapy to meditation apps, finally found this when she stopped trying to heal. She spent an evening in her garden, not meditating, not practicing gratitude, not trying to achieve a state of peace. She was simply sitting in that wordless hour. She realized that she didn't need to know why. She felt anxious to know that she was okay. She didn't need to explain her depression, to hold it with kindness. The silence gave her a refuge that all the books in the world could not provide. Learning to be comfortable with not knowing is the most practical skill you can ever develop. It allows you to exist in the world without the exhausting requirement of having a ready-made narrative for your life. When someone asks you, "What are you doing with your life?" or "How are you dealing with this struggle?" you can offer the gift of a genuine, unadorned, "I don't know," and that is okay. There is a powerful Zen story of a teacher who was invited to lecture at a prestigious university. Hundreds of intellectuals gathered, pens in hand, eager to write down the wisdom they expected to hear. The teacher walked onto the stage, sat down, and said absolutely nothing for an hour. He simply breathed, looked at the audience with profound presence, and then bowed and walked off the stage. Many were furious, feeling cheated of the answers they came for. But a few those who had the courage to stop waiting for a lecture and start paying attention to the teacher's presence touched a wisdom that words can never convey. That silence was a direct transmission. It was a pointing to the awareness that exists before concepts, before the labels of successful or lost, and before the story of who I am. Noble silence reminds us that wisdom is not a collection of facts. It is a quality of presence. You can cultivate this silence in your daily life. You do not need to retreat to a cave. When you find yourself in a conversation, try to listen more than you speak. When you find yourself alone, try to resist the urge to fill the space with podcasts, music, or digital noise. Let the silence be a guest in your home. You will quickly discover that silence is not the absence of something. It is the presence of everything, stripped of the filter of your mental commentary. This refuge is portable. You can carry it into the supermarket, into the office, and into the middle of the most difficult conflicts. It is the portable peace that keeps you from being reactive to every surface disturbance. When words fail us, they inevitably will. When you touch the deepest parts of your existence, know that this is not a limitation. It is the threshold of a new way of knowing. You are stepping into a territory where you no longer need to explain your life, because you are finally living it directly. Chapter 9. The Middle Way as a Responsive Dance. After the journey of searching, taming, and eventually silencing the mind, one might fall into a new trap. The oscillation between extremes. We see this often in our own lives. We swing from the intense, rigid discipline of a self-improvement phase, where we try to control every thought and calorie, to the opposite extreme of total abandonment, where we throw up our hands and drift into unconsciousness, telling ourselves we have let go. We bounce between the judgment of our perceived failures and the avoidance of any honest self-reflection. This exhausting dance is exactly what the Buddha described as the landscape of suffering. His great breakthrough was the discovery of the middle way. However, it is a common error to mistake the middle way for a lukewarm compromise, a mediocre middle ground where you settle for less because you are afraid to aim for more. This could not be further from the truth. The middle way is not a fixed, stagnant position. It is a dynamic, living balance. It is the art of being fully engaged without being consumed. Think of the master potter. If they press the clay with too much force, the vessel cracks, unable to withstand the pressure of their ego. If they touch the clay with too little intent, the material remains a formless, useless lump. The master's hands move with a quality that is neither forceful nor hesitant. They are responsive. They feel the resistance of the clay, the moisture of the earth, and the speed of the wheel, making micro-adjustments in every passing second. This is the middle way. It is a responsive dance with reality. In your spiritual and daily life, this means finding the sustainable path between forcing and giving up. When you approach a goal, perhaps a professional project or a personal healing journey, the forcing extreme treats the endeavor like a military conquest. You use willpower as a hammer, beating yourself into submission until you are burnt out and resentful. The giving up extreme treats the endeavor as a lost cause, using the excuse of accepting things as they are to avoid the discomfort of growth. The middle way acknowledges that you are both the potter and the clay. You are the one who intends, and you are the one who is being shaped. You set your intention, you do the work, but you hold the outcome with a gentle hand. You are disciplined, but you are not rigid. You are compassionate, but you are not self-indulgent. This balance is especially vital in how we treat our emotions. When sadness or anxiety arises, the forcing extreme tries to fix the feeling, analyzing it like a technical error to be debugged. The giving up extreme lets the feeling drown the whole ship, identifying completely with the mood and allowing it to dictate every action. The middle way is skillful feeling. You acknowledge the emotion, you sit with it, you allow it to exist, but you maintain the spacious awareness that knows you are not the emotion itself. You are the sky, and the emotion is merely a cloud passing through. This balance prevents the spiritual materialism that keeps so many seekers stuck, the endless collection of techniques, books, and experiences, as if you were accumulating luggage for a journey you never actually take. You don't need more techniques, you need more presence. You don't need to be a better version of yourself. You need to be a more responsive version of yourself. You will find that you are constantly leaning toward one of these extremes. This is not a failure. It is the nature of the walk. The middle way is not a destination you reach. It is a constant, moment-to-moment correction. Like riding a bicycle, you are always tilting slightly left or right, making tiny, intuitive adjustments to keep the bike upright. Some days life requires you to lean into discipline. Other days it requires you to lean into rest. Some days you must speak your truth firmly. Other days you must listen with radical, quiet attention. When you live from the middle way, You become less reactive. You don't panic when things get difficult because you know that extremes are only temporary. You don't get attached to peak experiences because you understand that all states, pleasant or unpleasant, must eventually pass. You develop a kind of inner stability that is rooted in your ability to adapt. The middle way does not promise that life will be easy. It does not promise that you will never feel confused again. But it does offer something far more valuable: the freedom to meet whatever arises with the appropriate response rather than an automatic reaction. In this responsiveness, you find a peace that is not dependent on circumstances being perfect. You find a strength that does not require force, and a wisdom that emerges naturally from the soil of your own experience. You are no longer fighting the river, and you are no longer drowning in it. You are swimming, with every stroke perfectly timed to the movement of the water. Chapter 10. The River of Impermanence. We have been conditioned to believe that security is found in permanence. We reach for stability like a drowning person reaches for a rock, convinced that if we can just stop the world from changing, we will finally be safe. But the deeper you look into the nature of your own life, the more you realize that the rock is a mirage. You are not a stationary object in a changing world. You are part of the change itself. Everything you are currently experiencing is a passing phenomenon. Your body is a river of cells in constant flux. Your thoughts are a procession of images that arise, shimmer for a moment, and vanish into the past. Your emotions are weather patterns that move across the vast, clear sky of your awareness. To fight this is to fight your own nature. As the saying goes, you cannot step into the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and you are not the same person. The reason we suffer is not because things change, it is because we cling to them as if they were meant to stay. We cling to our youth, our status, our certainty, and even our definitions of who we are. When these things inevitably shift, we feel as though we are losing ourselves. But this is a fundamental category error. You are not the things that are passing. You are the awareness that witnesses their passing. Think of the ocean. The surface is chaotic. Waves rise, crash, foam, and subside. If you identify with the waves, you will be in a constant state of panic, terrified of the next crash. But if you identify with the water itself, you realize that while the shapes on the surface change, the essence remains deep, vast, and unmoved. You can witness the loss of a job, the end of a relationship, or the aging of your body without losing your fundamental ground. You are the deep, still water, even as the waves of impermanence roll across your surface. This is the secret to the letting go practice that so many find daunting. Letting go is not an act of willpower, it is an act of recognition. You do not have to force yourself to release your grip on an expectation or a grudge. You simply have to recognize that your grip is based on the illusion that you can control the tide. When you truly see that everything you hold is already slipping through your fingers, you stop trying to squeeze. You open your hands, and in that opening, you find a freedom you never knew existed. Consider the young woman who built a dam across a river in her village. She wanted the water to be still, to be constant, to stay exactly where she could see it. She succeeded for a time, but within days, the pool grew stagnant. The water clouded, the smell of decay filled the air, and the life downstream began to wither. She realized then that the river's power, its clarity, and its ability to nourish the entire valley depended entirely on its movement. She dismantled the dam, and the river rushed forward, fresh and alive. Your life is that river. When you try to dam up your experience, when you try to fix your life into a permanent, predictable state, you create stagnation. You stop the flow of new insights, new relationships, and new versions of yourself. But when you allow the current to move, you stay fresh. You remain responsive to the needs of the land you pass through. You carve new channels where old ones were blocked. This perspective completely transforms how you meet the difficult chapters of your life. When you know that no emotional state lasts forever, not the grief, not the anxiety, not even the despair, you can endure the intensity without being overwhelmed by it. You learn to watch the storm from the vantage point of the deep water. You can feel the full weight of your humanity, while knowing that the weather will eventually change. Equally, this helps you appreciate the good times without the shadow of fear. Most people cannot enjoy a sunset because they are already mourning the fact that it is ending. They cannot love fully because they are terrified of loss. When you embrace impermanence, you realize that the sunset is beautiful because it is fleeting. The love is precious because it is a gift of the present. You do not need to freeze a frame the beauty to own it. You experience it fully precisely because you know you cannot keep it. This is the resilience of the river. You do not build walls against the change, you develop the capacity to flow around the obstacles. You learn to trust that the river does not flow randomly. It is guided by the fundamental laws of nature. You may not know where the next bend in the river leads, but you know that the flow is taking you toward the ocean of your own being. When you finally stop fighting the current and learn to swim with it, you discover that the change you feared is actually the mechanism of your liberation. You are being carried toward experiences, understanding, and growth that you could never have planned. You are participating in the grand, ever-changing dance of existence. In that dance, you find a peace that does not depend on the world staying the same, a joy that does not require guarantees, and a love that grows stronger because it has finally ceased to try to possess. You are like the river, always moving, always changing, and always finally home. Chapter 11. The Ultimate Liberation Non-Self. After all the work of searching for the tracks, taming the wild energies of the mind, and learning to sit in the noble silence between thoughts, you might find yourself arriving at the most startling realization of all. There was never a solid someone who needed to be fixed in the first place. This is the teaching of Anatith doctrine of non-self. It is often the most misunderstood and intimidating concept in all of Buddhism, frequently mistaken for a philosophy of nothingness. But in practice, it is the ultimate relief. It is the end of the exhausting, lifelong project of becoming somebody. Right now, as you read these words, your mind is likely attempting to verify them. It is checking. Does this fit my personality? Is this the kind of person I am? Does this confirm my identity as a spiritual seeker? This internal editor is a machine that never sleeps. It is constantly constructing a solid sense of I to navigate the world. But if you stop for a moment and look directly at that I, what do you actually find? Do you find a permanent core, a static entity that has remained unchanged since your birth? No, you find only a stream of sensations, thoughts, and memories, a shifting pattern of phenomena that we have simply agreed to call you. The prison of identity is built on the belief that you must be consistent. We believe that if we have been shy, we must always be shy. If we have been the smart one, we can never be the beginner. If we have been broken, we must always define ourselves through the lens of our trauma. We spend our lives defending these walls. We suppress parts of ourselves that don't fit our label, and we perform the parts that do. This is a life of constant performance, and it is the source of profound hidden exhaustion. But what happens when you stop performing? What happens when you drop the costume? In those rare, beautiful moments of flow, perhaps when you are helping a stranger, or completely absorbed in a craft, or laughing at a joke that vanishes, there is no one there trying to be anything. There is simply the activity itself, the helping, the creating, the laughing. In that state, you are not a somebody, you are a channel for life's expression. This is not a state of being nobody, it is a state of being everybody. You are free to be playful, free to be serious, free to be gentle, free to be fierce, not because you are consistent, but because you are responsive. Consider the monk who asked his teacher, "If there is no self, then who is asking this question?" The teacher led him to a hall of mirrors. Some were clear, some were tinted, some were cracked, some were warped. "How many moons do you see?" the teacher asked. The monk replied that he saw dozens of different reflections. "And if I take away the mirrors?" the teacher asked then. The monk replied, "There is only one moon in the sky. You are not the mirror, and you are not the reflection. You are the light that allows the reflection to appear. Your personality is just one way the moon of consciousness is being reflected through your unique history, your temperament, and your experiences. Some reflections are clearer than others, but they are all expressions of the same single awareness. When you stop obsessing over the clarity or the shape of your personal mirror, you realize that you are the light itself, vast, whole, and already complete. This shift brings a radical, practical freedom. When you take your identity less personally, you become bulletproof. If you don't define yourself as the successful person, failure cannot destroy you. If you don't define yourself as the virtuous person, a mistake cannot ruin your reputation. You are no longer defending a fragile ego, because you have recognized that the ego was always a constructed tool, like a hammer or a key, to be used when necessary and put down when the work is done. The freedom of non-self is the freedom to change your mind. You can discard a belief today that you held yesterday, not because you are unreliable, but because you are evolving. You can forgive yourself for who you were, because you recognize that who you were was just a passing cloud in the sky of your awareness. You are no longer trapped by the weight of your own history. This is the ultimate remedy for feeling lost. You weren't lost because there was never a fixed you that needed to be found in the first place. The lostness you felt was simply the dissolution of the false boundaries you had drawn around yourself. You are not a problem to be solved, and you are not a project to be perfected. You are the space in which the entire universe is occurring. Rest in this. Let the effort of becoming fall away. Beneath all the stories, beneath all the strategies, beneath all the fear of being nobody, there is a vibrant, awake, and loving presence that has always been there. It does not need a name. It does not need a definition. It simply needs to be acknowledged. You were never broken. You were never behind, and you were never separate. You are always exactly what you are. The open, boundless awareness that is home to everything. Chapter 12. Suffering as the Sacred Messenger. We have arrived at the final threshold of this inquiry, the radical reframing of suffering itself. In our modern age, we are conditioned to treat pain, whether it is the ache of loneliness, the sting of failure, or the persistent fog of anxiety, as a malfunction in our personal operating system. We view it as a bug, a sign that we have veered off the map, or a cosmic penalty for not being enlightened enough. But Buddhism offers a profound and ultimately hopeful inversion of this view. It suggests that dukkha, the inherent unsatisfactoriness of life, is not a punishment. It is a sacred messenger. When you experience suffering, your natural instinct is to run to medicate, to distract, to solve, or to numb. This is a survival mechanism. But the path of wisdom asks us to pause, even for a heartbeat, and ask, what is this pain trying to communicate? Pain is the friction between what you want reality to be and what reality actually is. It is the alarm bell that rings when you are bumping into the hard edges of truth. When you suffer, it is often because you are clinging to a version of yourself that is dying, or an outcome that is no longer possible. If you ignore the messenger, you continue to bang your head against the wall. If you listen to it, the pain becomes the very key that unlocks the next door. Consider the merchant in the desert who stepped on a thorn. His first impulsive thought was to yank it out and keep marching. But the desert guide stopped him. "Look at where the thorn is pointing," she urged. He looked, and he saw that the thorn was directing him toward a path he had not considered a route that led to a hidden spring and away from a brewing sandstorm. Had he simply fixed the pain by removing the thorn, he would have continued toward his own destruction. The pain was not the enemy, the pain was the scout. Your suffering often serves the same function. That profound sense of stuckness you feel in your job, it might be the thorn pointing toward a career that aligns with your deeper values. That heartache from a failed relationship, it might be pointing toward the necessity of boundaries you never knew how to set. Your discomfort is not an obstacle to your life. It is the most honest indicator of your life. To use pain as a teacher requires skillful feeling. This is the practice of meeting your own struggle with the same curiosity you would offer a child who has scraped their knee. You don't tell the child to get over it or stop being so sensitive. You hold them. You acknowledge the wound, and you observe it. When you bring this same tenderness to your own anxiety or grief, you create a space where the wisdom inside the pain can be heard. However, we must exercise discernment. Not all pain is a teacher. If your suffering is overwhelming, if it is traumatic, or if it is affecting your ability to function, it is not a philosophical exercise. It is a signal that you need professional support. Part of the middle way is knowing when the thorn is too deep to pull out alone, and when you need the steady, skilled hands of a guide. The transformation occurs when you stop defining yourself through your suffering. You are not an anxious person. You are a person experiencing the sensation of anxiety. You are not a failure. You are a person who has encountered the reality of a difficult situation. By separating the sensation from the story you tell yourself about it, you reduce the extra layers of agony that the ego adds to the original experience. As you go forward, remember that you are the gardener of your own landscape. The storms of your life are not personal attacks. They are the natural weather of human existence. They carry the rain that nourishes the deeper roots of your soul. When the suffering arises, and it will, do not try to banish it. Do not try to make it mean something negative about your worth. Simply ask, where are you pointing? What are you trying to show me? This is the ultimate secret of the journey. The thorns, the storms, the confusion, and the lostness are all part of the path. You are not drifting away from your purpose. You are being redirected, refined, and ripened by the very challenges you once feared. You have everything you need to navigate this, because the awareness that witnesses your suffering is the same awareness that has held every seeker who ever walked this earth. You are already home. You are not a project. You are not a problem. You are the vast, spacious, and ever-unfolding mystery of life itself, experiencing itself through the unique lens of your own journey, and that in every moment is enough. Chapter 13, The Marketplace of Helping Hands. We have climbed the spiral, sat in the silence, and learned to dance with the storms. We have dismantled the fixed identity and discovered that the self we were protecting was a shadow. Now we arrive at the final stage of the ancient 10 bulls parable, a stage that is not a departure from the world, but a homecoming. Entering the marketplace with helping hands. Many people believe that the end of a spiritual journey is to retreat to find a quiet, isolated space far from the clamor of the modern world. But that is only a halfway house. True awakening is not about transcendence, it is about integration. The ultimate test of your peace is not how quiet you can remain in a meditation hall, but how present, compassionate, and awake you can remain in the middle of a crowded, chaotic, and demanding world. You return to the marketplacito, your job, your family, your community, and the daily grind, but you return fundamentally transformed. You are no longer performing a role to satisfy expectations. You are no longer driven by the frantic need to prove your worth. You are simply living. You work. You love. You engage in the necessary mundane tasks of survival, but you do so from a place of radical freedom. When you enter the marketplace as an awakened person, your presence itself becomes a teaching. You do not need to preach. You do not need to proselytize. You simply show up. People sense the difference in you. They feel a sense of calm when they are near you, a sense of permission to lower their own guards. When you listen to a colleague or a friend, you are not waiting for your turn to speak or judging their words against your own history. You are fully there. You are a mirror that allows them to see themselves more clearly. This is the helping hand. It is the natural expression of a heart that has realized its interconnectedness with all beings. You see the same confusion, the same searching, and the same lostness in others that you once felt in yourself. You recognize the thorns in their feet and the empty boats that have crashed into them. Instead of judging them for their patterns or their reactivity, you hold them with compassion. You know how hard it is to be human, and that knowledge creates a bridge of empathy that no argument could ever build. The beauty of this final stage is that it is the most ordinary thing in the world. There is nothing special about it. You might return to the same office, the same house, or the same social circle you had before you began this search, but the context has shifted. You are no longer living in a state of compulsion. You are living in a state of contribution. You choose to be kind, not because you have to, but because it is the most honest response to the human condition. You choose to act, not because you need an outcome, but because the moment invites your participation. As you integrate these teachings to the beginner's mind, the middle way, the fluidity of identity, you will find that your life becomes a natural expression of these truths. You don't try to be wise. Wisdom simply happens through you, just as music happens through a flute. You are the instrument, and life is the breath. So take this breath, feel your feet on the ground. Acknowledge that you are still here, still navigating, still growing. That is not nothing, that is the entire point. You are a part of the vast, interconnected web of existence, and your willingness to show up, to be honest, and to be present is the most precious gift you can offer to the world. The search ends not because you found an answer, but because you realized the question was the path. You are home. You are already exactly who you need to be. Go into your marketplace, engage with the messiness of your life, and hold your helping hands out to those who are still looking for their bull. Your journey has prepared you for this moment. Your presence is the medicine, and your life in all its beautiful, non-linear unfolding is the teaching. The journey through these pages ends, but your life as a practice begins now. Carry this silence into your noise, this compassion into your conflicts, and this presence into your plans. You are the architect of your own awakening. Walk on. Chapter 14. The infinite horizon of not knowing. We often speak of the journey as if it has a final destination, a peak from which we can survey the landscape of our lives and say, I have arrived. But the most liberating secret of the path is that it never truly ends. Even after you have entered the marketplace, even after you have found your helping hands, the horizon continues to expand. The 10 bulls parable does not conclude with a monument to the herder's wisdom, it concludes with him still walking. We must guard against the temptation to turn our newfound peace into a new kind of prison. It is easy, after learning these teachings, to begin performing a new identity, the wise one. We might start to believe that because we have learned to dance with difficulty, we should no longer feel the sting of it. We might believe that because we have understood emptiness, we should no longer feel the pangs of desire or the gravity of loss. But to hold such a belief is to return to the rigidity of the oak. It is to close the door to the very beginner's mind that started this journey. The truth is that the master is also a student. The sage is also a wanderer. The helping hand is also a hand that occasionally shakes. There is a profound beauty in this unfinished nature of our humanity. It means that tomorrow morning you will wake up and be confronted with the same mystery of existence. You will have to decide again how to meet your coffee, your commute, your conflicts, and your quiet moments. You will have to choose again to be present. This is not a burden, it is the gift of perpetual freshness. You are never done with being human. Because being human is not a task to be completed, it is a light to be kept burning. As you move forward, keep a watchful eye on your need to anchor yourself. When you feel the urge to label your progress, or to define your level of awakening, or to categorize your life as a success, gently breathe. Return to the don't know mind. If you find yourself thinking, I have mastered this, that is the exact moment to ask, what is this? With the wonder of a child seeing the snow for the first time. The world will continue to demand your attention. There will be new technologies, new social shifts, new personal challenges, and new seasons of life that you could never have anticipated. Do not try to meet them with the map you have drawn today. Meet them with the openness of your empty hands. You may find that you'd occasionally slip back into the old patterns of perfectionism, or that you lose your grip on the middle way, or that you feel lost in the woods once again. When this happens, do not judge it as a regression. Remember the spiral. You are not back at the beginning, you are simply at a new turn in the stairwell, meeting the same themes with more seasoned eyes. You are allowed to be imperfect. You are allowed to stumble. You are allowed to be confused. In fact, the most authentic way to move through the world is to remain a perpetual beginner. The more you know, the more you realize how vast the unknown is. This is not a source of fear, it is the source of all genuine creativity. It is the reason why the most innovative ideas do not come from the closed doors of expertise, but from the open, questioning hearts of those willing to be wrong. So let your life be a continuous inquiry. Let your relationships be a continuous practice of deep listening. Let your work be a continuous offering of your presence, and let your own heart be a continuous unfolding garden. You do not need to be any further along than where you are standing right now. Your confusion is the soil, your presence is the water, and your willingness to keep showing up is the sunlight. As you step into the rest of your life, remember the empty boat. When the mist clears and you see that the boat was never manned by an enemy, you can simply push it away and continue your journey. You do not need to carry the grudge, the memory, or the fear. You are free to be light. You are free to be fluid. You are free to be exactly what you are. A vital, breathing, ever-changing part of a universe that is itself always in the process of becoming. The path is beneath your feet. The bull is not something you catch and lock away. It is the very essence of your life, wandering through the fields with you. You are the seeker and the sought, the traveler and the road, the silence and the sound, you are already home, and you are just getting started. Chapter 15, The Art of Deep Listening When Presence is the Medicine. In our modern, fast-paced existence, we have become master conversationalists but amateur listeners. We treat communication like a high-speed data transfer. I wait for you to stop talking so I can download my response, my opinion, or my solution into the space you have just vacated. We listen not to understand but to categorize, to judge, or to prepare our defense. We are always one step ahead of the person speaking, mentally rehearsing the next clever line. And in doing so, we commit a subtle, invisible violence against the present moment. Deep listening, or what the Zen tradition might call listening with the whole body, is the most profound gift you can offer another human being. It is the act of creating a sanctuary of silence within yourself so that the other person feels truly seen. It is the practice of suspending your expert mind, that part of you that wants to fix, analyze, or compare, and instead stepping into the don't-know space where true connection resides. Imagine sitting across from a friend who is navigating a profound difficulty. Their words are tangled, their voice is shaking. Your instinct, driven by your own discomfort at seeing them hurt, is to offer a quick fix. You want to give them the right advice, the right quote, or the right perspective to solve their pain. But deep listening understands that the most powerful medicine is not found in your advice, is found in your presence. When you offer your full, undivided attention, you are saying, I am here with you. I am not rushing to leave this pain. I am willing to hold this uncertainty alongside you. This kind of listening requires a radical form of courage. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of not knowing what to say. Most of us are terrified of the awkward silence, so we fill it with filler phrases. Oh, that's terrible. You should try this. I know exactly how you feel. But these phrases, however well-intentioned, often function as walls. They terminate the exploration. When you embrace the silence, when you look into the other person's eyes and allow the pause to deepen, you are telling them that their experience is safe with you. You are inviting them to go deeper, to explore the nuance of their own truth that they might have glossed over if you had been busy offering advice. The paradox of deep listening is that by letting go of the need to respond, you become infinitely more responsive. When you are not busy building a mental architecture of what I should say next, your mind becomes spacious. You begin to hear the things that are left unsaid. You hear the fatigue in a sigh, the hesitation before a difficult confession, the underlying hope beneath a narrative of despair. You hear the heartbeat of the other person's experience. This practice is a form of spiritual service. In a world where everyone is clamoring to be heard, to have their personal brand recognized, or to have their point of view validated, the person who listens with genuine, humble curiosity is a rare and healing force. You do not need to be a counselor, a monk, or a genius to do this. You only need to offer the empty vessel of your presence. Try this in your next conversation. Even with someone you think you know perfectly well, imagine that you are seeing them for the first time. Suspend your assumptions about their personality, their history, or their typical viewpoints. Listen as if your life depended on understanding the essence of what they are sharing. Notice when your mind tries to grab the steering wheel to insert an opinion. Notice when your ego begins to feel impatient. Simply acknowledge those impulses. Let them float by like clouds, and return your focus to the sound of their voice, the movement of their hands, and the subtle energy of their presence. You will find that deep listening transforms your relationships from the inside out. People stop feeling the need to defend their positions when they feel truly heard. The defensive armor that most of us carry around the world begins to soften in the presence of an attentive, non-judgmental listener. You are creating the conditions for their own wisdom to emerge. You are not doing anything to them. You are simply providing the space where they can finally hear themselves. This is the alchemy of presence. It is the realization that most of us are not suffering because we lack information. We are suffering because we lack the experience of being truly seen. When you listen deeply, you are telling the other person, you are enough. Your experience is valid. I am here and I am not leaving. That realization itself is the beginning of all healing in the marketplace of life. This is the most valuable currency you possess. It costs nothing to give. yet it is worth everything to the one who receives it. Chapter 16. The Architecture of Empathy, Expanding the Boundaries of Self. If deep listening is the practice of creating a sanctuary of silence for another, then empathy is the expansion of the walls of that sanctuary until they encompass the world. We have spent much of our journey learning to dismantle the self, that solid, rigid construction of identity, to free ourselves from its limitations. But there is a secondary benefit to this dissolution that is even more profound. Once the walls of the I become porous, the walls between you and me also begin to blur. We often imagine empathy as an intellectual exercise. I can understand why you feel that way, but true empathy, in the light of our inquiry, is a physiological and spiritual recognition of interconnectedness. It is the realization that the suffering you see in the eyes of a stranger is the same suffering that lives in your own chest. It is the recognition that the joy radiating from a friend is a ripple in the same ocean that sustains your own spirit. When you let go of the fixed self, you stop viewing the world through the lens of competition, my survival versus yours, my success versus your failure. Instead, you begin to see the world as a vast webbed ecology. Every action you take, every word you speak, and even every thought you harbor ripples out into the collective consciousness. When you are kind to yourself, you are planting seeds of kindness that will inevitably benefit the whole. When you treat someone else with cruelty, you are, in a very literal karmic sense, poisoning your own garden. This is not a call to sacrifice your boundaries or become a doormat. On the contrary, the middle way applies here as much as it does to our personal meditation. True empathy requires a firm, grounded sense of one's own center. You cannot truly hold space for another if you have no space of your own to stand in. But once you have that center, you can allow your heart to become a bridge. Consider the times you have felt a deep, piercing connection to someone you've never even met, a character in a book, a person in a documentary, or a stranger you saw in the street. In that flash of recognition, you were not you and they were not they. You were both simply experiencing the raw, unfiltered truth of human fragility. That is the architecture of empathy. It is the bridge that spans the gap of individual experience and lands on the solid ground of our shared nature. The practice of empathy, like the practice of silence, begins with not knowing. We are so quick to build theories about others. He is that way because of his upbringing. She is like that because she's successful. These labels are mental shutters. They prevent us from seeing the person as they are in this current moment. To be truly empathic, you must be willing to meet the other person with the same beginners mind you bring to your own meditation. You must be willing to say, I do not know your story, I only know that you are here, and that is enough. When you witness someone struggling, especially if they are behaving in ways that you find difficult or triggering, try to hold them in a perspective of karmic compassion. Recognize that they, too, are caught in the web of their own conditioning, their own inherited bindings, and their own desperate attempts to feel safe. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it gives you the clarity to respond to the person rather than the pattern. You can hold a boundary firmly while holding the person with an open, compassionate heart. This is the ultimate expression of the middle way in our interactions with others. As you cultivate this wider empathy, you will find that the world begins to feel less like a battlefield and more like a classroom. You will find that your own lostness becomes a common language. When you open up about your own struggles, your own periods of confusion, your own empty boat moments, you give others permission to do the same. This is how you help build a culture of vulnerability in a society obsessed with perfection. The architecture of empathy is the final step in the transition from a separate self to a participatory self. You are no longer just a character in your own story. You are a witness and a contributor to the stories of everyone you encounter. The boundary between your life and the life begins to dissolve, and in that dissolution you find the greatest irony of all. You are never less alone than when you recognize that the you were protecting was never actually separate from the rest of the world. You are part of the vast, breathing, suffering, and rejoicing collective of life. And for now, that is enough to carry you home. Chapter 17. The Alchemy of Loss, Transforming Grief into Groundedness. There is no map for the terrain of loss. When we experience the death of a loved one, the shattering of a dream, or the sudden evaporation of a life we spent years constructing. The ground beneath our feet feels as if it has turned to liquid. We are left with the cold, hard reality of absence. In our culture, we are often encouraged to move on, to get over it, or to find a silver lining as quickly as possible. We are taught that grief is a hurdle to be jumped, rather than a sacred fire that burns away what is no longer essential. But the Buddhist perspective on impermanence invites us to look at loss not as a tragedy to be avoided, but as the ultimate teacher of reality. If everything is in flux, if everything is a river, then loss is not an interruption of life. It is the very mechanism through which life moves. When we lose something precious, we are confronted with the raw, naked truth of our own existence, that we are finite, that our time is borrowed, and that the only thing we truly possess is the capacity to be present in this exact moment. The alchemy of loss begins when we stop trying to fix our grief. When we treat our sorrow as a problem to be solved, we create a layer of suffering on top of our pain. We judge ourselves for being stuck. We worry that we are not progressing in our healing. But grief is not a linear process, it is a landscape. You do not move through it so much as you settle into it. And in that settling, you discover that you are becoming larger. The heart that has been broken is the only heart capable of holding the world's true depth. When you lose something you were deeply attached to, identity, a person, a role, you are essentially experiencing the emptiness we discussed earlier. You are seeing the space where something solid used to be. Instead of trying to fill that space with distraction or false comfort, sit with it. This is the practice of noble sorrow. It is the willingness to feel the emptiness without trying to turn away. By allowing yourself to feel the full weight of the loss, you are honoring the depth of the love or the investment you once held. The capacity to feel that deep, hollow ache is in itself a testament to your humanity. In this space of loss, you might find that the beginner's mind returns with a vengeance. You have been stripped of your familiar routines and your old assumptions. You are back to zero. In this naked state, you cannot rely on your expertise or your plans. You are forced to rely on the simplest, most immediate things: the next breath, the next step, the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other. You discover that even when everything else has been stripped away, your capacity for presence remains. This is the groundedness that loss provides. It cuts through the superficial layers of your life like a scythe, leaving only what is truly essential. Do not fear the recurrence of grief. As we learned with the spiral of awakening, you will meet your loss again and again, anniversaries, in quiet moments, in sudden triggers. But each time you meet it, you are meeting it from a more grounded place. You are no longer afraid of being swept away, because you have learned that the water of grief, while cold and deep, is not poison. It is simply life, moving through you. When you walk through the fire of loss, you eventually emerge with a quality of compassion that is tempered, not brittle. You find that you can sit with others in their own dark nights without trying to fix them. You have been there, you know the terrain. Your presence becomes a quiet, steady lighthouse for those who are currently caught in their own storms. This is the alchemy. The lead of your suffering is transformed into the gold of your wisdom. You are not the same person you were before the loss, and that is as it should be. The person who lived before was perhaps more comfortable, but the person who lives now is more real. You have been hollowed out by the experience of loss, and in that hollowness, you have become a vessel for a deeper, more profound kind of peace, a peace that does not require everything to be perfect, but is instead rooted in the indestructible reality of the present moment. You are still here, you are still breathing, and through the alchemy of grief, you have discovered that you are far more resilient than you ever dared to imagine. Chapter 18. The Art of Letting Go, Releasing the Bases We Build. We often speak of letting go as if it were a singular, dramatic event, a grand gesture of surrender where we toss our burdens into the wind and never look back. But in the reality of a human life, letting go is a microscopic, moment-to-moment practice. It is the act of unclenching our hands every time we notice we have grabbed hold of a base, a place, an idea, a person, or a version of ourselves that we have decided is our final destination. We are, by nature, builders. We build mental bases of operation to feel safe. We think, if I can just reach this milestone in my career, then I will be secure. Or if I can just secure this relationship, then I will be home. We build these structures, move into them, and then, inevitably, become their prisoners. When the world shifts as it must, due to the law of impermanence, we stay inside these crumbling structures, terrified of the cold air of the unknown. But what if you lived in a tent instead of a castle? Not literally, but metaphorically. What if you carried your sense of home within you, rather than pinning it to external circumstances? The practice of letting go is the practice of realizing that you are not the structure, you are the one who resides within it. When you feel a sense of intense clinging, that tight, hot sensation in your chest when things don't go as planned, take a breath and investigate the base you are trying to defend. Is it a belief about how your day should have gone? Is it an image of yourself as someone who is never wrong? Is it a hope that someone else will finally change? Recognize that your attachment to this base is not a sign of love or commitment, it is a sign of fear. You are afraid that if you let go of the base, you will be lost. But as we have explored throughout this journey, being lost is the only state in which you are truly available to be found by the truth. This practice applies to the bases of our self-concept. Perhaps you have built a base around being the strong one. When you are tired, when you are overwhelmed, when you need support, you feel like a failure because your identity as the strong one is under siege. Letting go means allowing that base to dissolve. It means having the courage to say, I am not the strong one. I am a human being who is currently experiencing exhaustion. When you stop defending the base, the exhaustion becomes workable, human, and temporary. You stop being the person who is exhausted, and you become the person who is experiencing exhaustion. This is the freedom of the nomad's heart. You move through life with gratitude for the places you stay, the people you love, and the roles you play, but you never confuse the hotel room for your true nature. You stay fully engaged. You contribute your best work. You love with your whole heart, but you hold the keys to the room loosely. You are always ready to pack up and move to the next turn in the spiral. This practice is the antidote to the stagnation of success. Many people reach their goals only to find themselves trapped by them. They built their base, they moved in, and now they are bored, fearful, and stifled. Letting go allows you to burn down your own accomplishments when they no longer serve your spirit. It gives you the license to be a beginner again, to start over, to redefine your life at any age. When you stop trying to build a permanent monument to yourself, you begin to live a life that is truly alive. You become like the wind which leaves no tracks, or the water which leaves no scars. You are not trying to leave a mark. You are trying to be a participant. So, look around your life today. What are the structures you are holding onto so tightly that your knuckles have turned white? What is the base you are defending against the inevitability of change? Take a breath, acknowledge the fear that keeps you clutching, and then just for a moment open your hand. Let the base be what it is, and let yourself be what you are. A consciousness that is not bound by any walls, a traveler who is always already home, regardless of where the current has taken you today. Chapter 19. The Sanctuary of Self-Compassion, Healing the Inner Child. We have spent our journey dismantling the self and realizing its fluidity. Yet there is one aspect of the human experience that requires not our detachment, but our deepest, most tender embrace, the inner child. This is not a metaphor for a past version of you. It is the living, breathing repository of your early memories, your unmet needs, and the raw sensitivity you were born with before the world taught you to harden. When we feel the gnawing anxiety of being lost or the sharp sting of shame after a mistake, we are often triggered in a place that has nothing to do with our current adult circumstances. We are reacting from that vulnerable, younger place that once learned to associate mistakes with danger or silence with safety. Most of our self-attack, that internal committee of critics that whispers, "You are not enough," is actually a misdirected attempt by the psyche to protect that vulnerable child from further harm. It is a misguided defense mechanism. If I am the first to criticize myself, perhaps I can beat the world to it and avoid being hurt. Healing this requires the practice of parenting the self. We are so quick to offer empathy to a friend who is struggling, yet we treat our own woundedness with cold, intellectual distance, or, worse, with hostility. To practice self-compassion is to realize that you are both the one who is hurting and the one who has the capacity to hold that hurt. When a moment of profound inadequacy arises, do not look away. Do not try to reason it away with logic. Instead, pause, place a hand over your heart. Breathe into the tightness in your chest. Speak to that younger part of you, not with the voice of a judge, but with the voice of a wise, grounded adult who has finally arrived to take care of things. You might say, I see you are scared. I see you feel like you failed. It is okay, I am here, and I am not going anywhere. This is the alchemy of self-compassion. You are not coddling yourself. You are creating a sanctuary within your own body, where the wounded parts of your psyche feel safe enough to stop acting out. When that inner child realizes that they are no longer alone, that they no longer have to perform for approval or defend against criticism, they begin to relax. The acting out, the procrastination, the people-pleasing, the self-sabotage naturally begins to subside because the underlying need for safety is finally being met. True compassion is not a soft, passive state. It is an act of fierce, uncompromising love. It requires you to say no to the voices of shame that were implanted by others, and yes to the inherent worthiness you possessed from the day you were born. You are reparenting yourself, replacing the conditioned scripts of shoulds and musts with the living reality of I am worthy because I am. As you move through your day, practice catching the moments when you are being unkind to yourself. When you hear the critic speak, invite that voice to tea, but do not give it the keys to your life. Instead, turn your attention to the part of you that is being criticized. Offer that part the warmth and kindness you would offer a child who has just fallen down. Notice how the internal landscape changes when you do this. The tension softens. The fog of confusion clears just enough for you to see your next step. You are the only person who will be with you from the first breath to the last. Making peace with that inner presence is not a luxury, it is the foundation of all other forms of freedom. When you can hold your own vulnerability with respect, you will find that you no longer need the world to validate you. You have become your own sanctuary. You have become the parent you always needed, and in doing so, you have finally truly come home to yourself. Chapter 20. The Silent Guardian Cultivating the Inner Witness. Throughout our journey, we have talked about awareness as if it were a distant, abstract concept of vast sky or a calm ocean. But it is time to recognize this presence for what it truly is, your silent guardian. This is the part of you that does not panic when the waves crash, does not judge when the mistakes are made, and does not despair when the path vanishes. In the tradition of mindfulness, we call this the inner witness. Most of us live our lives from the perspective of the actor, the one who is frantically trying to deliver lines, hit marks, and impress an imaginary audience. The actor is exhausted. The actor is terrified of forgetting the script. The actor is the one who suffers the most when the scene doesn't go according to plan. But beneath the actor, there is the witness. The witness is the one sitting in the audience, watching the performance with quiet, detached interest. The witness is never on stage. The witness is never in danger. When you feel yourself spiraling into anxiety or being consumed by a recurring pattern, you have likely lost touch with the witness. You have become completely identified with the actor. You think I am the anxiety or I am the confusion. But as soon as you can stop and say, there is anxiety, or I notice there is confusion, you have shifted your seat. You have stepped off the stage and back into the audience. You are no longer the actor being tossed about. You are the silent observer of the tossing. This shift is the ultimate secret to emotional regulation. You don't need to suppress your emotions, and you don't need to fix them. You simply need to expand the room they are in. When a difficult feeling arises, imagine it as a visitor in your living room. If you are sitting in the same chair as the visitor, you will be crushed by their weight. But if you walk to the other side of the room and sit in the armchair of the witness, you can watch the visitor, offer them a glass of water, and remain perfectly calm. The witness is the part of you that never ages, never breaks, and never forgets who you really are. It is the part of you that remembers the child you were, the trials you survived, and the truth that lives beneath your roles. It is the silent, steady pulse of your existence. How do you cultivate this? Through the practice of micropauses. Throughout your day while you are waiting in line, before you open a difficult email, or when you are transitioning from one task to the next stop. Take one conscious breath. Ask yourself, who is aware of this moment? In that tiny sliver of a second, The actor stops and the witness wakes up. You will feel a sudden, slight drop in your shoulders. The world will feel a little bit more spacious. Do not expect this to make your life effortless. The witness does not guarantee a painless life. It guarantees a life where you are never completely lost. Even in the middle of a catastrophe, the witness remains untouched. It is the peace that passes understanding. As you practice this, you will find that the inner witness begins to take over more of your daily experience. You will notice yourself observing your own reactions before they happen. You will laugh at your own ego's attempts to make a scene. You will remain steady when others around you are caught in the turbulence of their own actor roles. This is not detachment, it is the ultimate engagement. When you are rooted in the witness, you are not pulled into the chaos of the world. You can be the calm center of the storm. You can be the voice of reason when everyone else is shouting. You can be the hand of compassion when everyone else is reaching for a weapon. You have spent a lifetime building your identity, your career, and your social standing, your actor portfolio. Now, spend the rest of your life building your relationship with the witness. This is the only investment that yields a return of total, indestructible freedom. The actor will eventually leave the stage, but the witness is the stage, the audience, and the light itself. You are already that light. Simply remember to watch. Chapter 21. Digital stillness, cultivating presence in the age of noise. We live in a world that is designed to fragment our attention. Every notification, every endless scroll, every flashing headline is an invitation to leave the witness and become the actor in 1,000 different low-stakes dramas. The digital landscape mimics the nervous system of a creature under constant threat. It demands our reaction, our opinion, and our anxiety, all while keeping us tethered to a feedback loop that never truly satisfies. In this environment, not knowing is no longer just a spiritual practice, it is an act of resistance. To keep your own counsel, to maintain the integrity of your awareness when the world is screaming for your distraction, requires a new kind of discipline. We must learn to cultivate digital stillness. Digital stillness does not necessarily mean throwing your devices into the sea. It means changing your relationship with them from one of consumption to one of intention. It means recognizing that your attention is the most precious resource you possess. It is the soil in which your reality grows. When you give your attention to the manufactured urgency of a screen, you are essentially outsourcing your inner life to an algorithm. How do we reclaim this? It begins with the practice of threshold mindfulness. Every time you reach for your phone, pause. Ask yourself, am I reaching for this because I have a genuine need? Or am I reaching for it because I am afraid of the silence of this moment? Often, we reach for our phones the way we reach for a blanket when we are cold. We are trying to cover the nakedness of our own boredom or loneliness. But that silence is not a void, it is the space where your true self breathes. When you choose to leave the phone in your pocket, you are choosing to be present with your own life. You can also practice batch awareness. Instead of letting your attention be splintered throughout the day, dedicate specific windows to your digital life and honor them with your full focus. Then, when the window closes, physically put the device away. Create a sanctuary of non-connection where you are not reachable, where you are not tracking, and where you are not performing. In this space, you are finally free from the need to manage your image or compare your progress. There is a subtle, profound joy in being off the grid, even for 20 minutes. You might find that without the constant infusion of other people's opinions, your own intuition begins to speak more clearly. You might find that the gnawing feeling of being behind disappears, because you are no longer measuring your existence against the carefully curated lives of millions of strangers. This is not about being a Luddite, it is about being a curator of your own consciousness. You are the sovereign of your attention. You have the right to say, not now. You have the right to protect the clarity of your witness. When you do this, you will find that the noise of the world, while it never fully goes away, begins to sound different. It becomes just another weather pattern, a sound in the distance that cannot touch the stillness at your center. By choosing digital stillness, you are reclaiming your humanity from a system that views you as data. You are choosing to be an active participant in your own unfolding, rather than a passive consumer of other people's projections. You are choosing to stay home within yourself, and in a world that is increasingly trying to pull you away. That is perhaps the most radical, loving, and transformative act of presence you can perform. Chapter 22. The liberation from the verdict, living beyond the shadow of achievement. We are raised in a culture that treats our lives as a perpetual courtroom. From the moment we enter the education system, we are graded, ranked, and assessed. We are taught that our value is a mathematical equation: effort, output, worth. By the time we reach adulthood, we have internalized this judge. We have become our own most relentless prosecutors, constantly evaluating ourselves against an invisible verdict of success or failure. This obsession with achievement is perhaps the greatest barrier to the beginner's mind. How can you approach life with wonder when you are busy calculating your ROI, return on investment? How can you truly listen to a friend, or appreciate a sunset, or sit in silence when your mind is whispering, "Is this productive? Is this getting me anywhere? What will people think of this?" The liberation from this verdict begins with a radical, quiet act of rebellion. You must declare yourself not guilty of being anything other than human. The verdict you fear is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. You believe that if you can just achieve enough, you will finally reach a state of safety where you will no longer be judged. You think that success is a shield, but the truth is that the courtroom of external opinion has no walls. You can achieve everything the world asks of you, and the court will simply raise the bar. The hunger for validation is a bottomless pit. You cannot fill it with the pebbles of accomplishment. To live beyond the shadow of the verdict, you must shift your focus from outcome to intent. When you engage in your work, your art, or your relationships, ask yourself, am I doing this to be seen, or am I doing this because it is an expression of my nature? When you act from nature, the work becomes its own reward. The artist who paints for the sake of the color does not need the critic's applause. The gardener who plants for the sake of the growth does not need the neighbor's praise. Their work is emptied of the ego's need for a verdict. It is simply an expression, as natural as the blooming of a flower or the flowing of a river. This does not mean you stop striving or stop setting goals. It means you change the texture of your striving. You can pursue excellence with all your heart, but you must do so while holding the result with an open hand. If you succeed, you celebrate the moment. If you fail, you treat the failure as information, not as a sentencing. You realize that a bad outcome does not equal a bad person. The most profound realization here is that the judge in your head is not you. It is a voice you inheritate, a voice formed by the expectations of parents, teachers, and a competitive society. When that voice begins to deliberate on your worth, visualize yourself stepping out of the courtroom. Walk out the door, leave the judge behind, and step back into the vast, unjudged territory of your own life there. In that territory, there is no ranking. There is no ahead or behind. There is only the rhythm of your own heart and the unfolding of the present. You do not need to be validated to exist. You do not need a trophy to be real. You are a miracle of awareness, a participant in a cosmic process that has no interest in your credentials. Every time you choose to do something simply because it brings you alive, you are striking a blow against the verdict. Every time you choose to rest without feeling guilty, you are reclaiming your sovereignty. You are slowly, surely, building a life that is so deeply rooted in the truth of your own experience that the outside verdict, whether it is praise or condemnation, simply cannot reach you. You are no longer living for the verdict, you are living for the life itself, and that is a freedom that no achievement could ever buy. Chapter 23. The geometry of enough, finding the center of your own life. We spend our lives navigating by the geometry of more status, more security, more certainty, more experiences to check off our lists. We are taught that growth is a straight line expanding infinitely outward. But if you look at the geometry of nature, the spiral of a shell, the whirl of a pine cone, the symmetry of a snowflake, you see that nature grows by returning to a center. It finds balance not by constant expansion, but by grounding itself in its own core. Finding enough is not a surrender to mediocrity. It is an act of reclaiming your sovereignty. When you live by the geometry of enough, you stop being a consumer of your own life and start being a steward of it. You recognize that your capacity for attention, love, and presence is finite, and that deciding where to place those resources is the most important choice you will ever make. Most of our suffering comes from the mismatch between our desires and our capacity. We want to be everywhere, know everything, and achieve everything, forgetting that to be human is to be inherently limited. And this limitation is not a tragedy, it is the frame that gives the picture its beauty. A painting without a frame is just paint on a wall. A life without limits is just a blur of activity. To find your own center of enough, begin by auditing your attachments. Look at the structures you have built: your schedule, your commitments, your possessions, your habits. Ask of each one, does this contribute to my center, or does it pull me toward the periphery? When you strip away the peripheral, you don't find a void, you find your own essential nature. You find that you have enough time to be present with the people who matter. You have enough energy to do work that feels meaningful. You have enough clarity to know who you are when no one is watching. Enough is the point where your outer life finally comes into alignment with your inner truth. This requires the courage to say no. Every time you say no to a peripheral distraction, you are saying yes to your own center. It is a protective, loving act of boundaries. It is not about being exclusive or difficult, it is about being intentional. When you clear the clutter, you find that your life, which once felt scattered and frantic, becomes spacious. You move slower, but you go further. You do less, but you feel more. This is the middle way in practice. You are not rejecting the world, you are engaging with it from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. When you operate from the feeling that you already have enough, you stop chasing, you stop performing, you stop competing. You realize that you are already standing on the ground you were trying so hard to reach. The geometry of enough also transforms your relationship with success. Instead of measuring your life by how much you have accumulated, you measure it by how deeply you are connected to the present moment. Is your life enough to hold your presence? Is your work enough to express your values? Is your heart enough to encompass your own humanity? You will find that as you shrink the circle of your needs, the circle of your joy begins to expand. You start to find wonder in the mundane. The morning coffee, the walk in the rain, the sound of a voice you love, these become sufficient. They are not merely steps on the way to something better. They are the destination. As you walk forward from this moment, let enough be your compass. Whenever you feel that familiar tug of more, pause and remember the spiral. You are not meant to keep expanding outward into the void. You are meant to deepen your root system, to ground yourself in the reality of what is right in front of you. You are enough. Your life is enough. The moment is enough. And in that simple, radical realization, you find the freedom that more could never provide. Chapter 24. The unfinished work: living as a process, not a product. We are nearing the end of our journey, and perhaps you are tempted to ask so. Have I reached the end? Am I awakened now? If you find yourself asking this, you are experiencing the final temptation of the ego desire to turn your spiritual journey into a finished product, a trophy to be displayed, a state of being that you can finally check off and put in a glass case. But life is an ongoing conversation, not a conclusion. There is no such thing as a completed human being. The moment you decide you have reached the finish line is the moment you stop growing. You are not a statue, you are a verb. You are not a noun, you are a continuous unfolding action. This is the great relief of the unfinished work. It means that you are allowed to remain a student for the rest of your days. You are allowed to be surprised by your own reactions next year. You are allowed to change your mind, to lose your way, and to discover new facets of your own soul that you couldn't have seen today. This is not an admission of failure. It is the exhilarating reality of living as a process. Consider the craftsperson who spends decades honing their skill. They do not work because they hope to one day stop working. They work because the process of refining, of learning, and of participating with the material is where the joy lives. Your life is your craft. You are the material, the artist, and the work of art all at once. There is no point in trying to finish it, because the beauty lies entirely in the shaping. When you view your life as a process, you stop seeing your setbacks as errors and start seeing them as iterations. Every time you slip back into an old pattern, you are simply gathering more data on your own complexity. Every time you find yourself lost, you are simply adding a new, necessary thread to the tapestry. You are learning more about what it means to be you. This perspective also liberates you from the need for perfection. Perfection is a static, dead thing. It is the end of change, but you are a living thing. And living things are characterized by their imperfections, their growth, their pruning, and their blooming. Your scars, your stumbles, and your questions are the textures that make your life authentic. They are the evidence that you have actually lived, rather than simply existed. Even the teachings we have explored in this book are not meant to be kept as rigid laws. They are meant to be used, and then, if necessary, set aside. If a practice no longer serves your spirit, leave it behind. If a realization no longer fits the person you are becoming, evolve it. You are the ultimate authority on your own unfolding. The unfinished work means that you are in a constant, creative partnership with the universe. You are not just following a script, you are improvising. As you move forward, embrace the beauty of not yet. You are not yet who you will be in 10 years, and that is a wonderful thing. You are not yet aware of the insights that will come to you in your next season of life. Keep your hands open. Keep your heart porous. Stay curious about the next turn in the spiral. You have learned to sit in silence, to listen deeply, to dance with difficulty, and to witness the actor on the stage. Now trust yourself to take these tools and use them to build a life that is uniquely, unrepeatably yours. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be enlightened by someone else's definition. You only need to be willing to show up, to keep learning, and to remain in love with the process. The work is never done, and that is why it is so beautiful. You are an ever-widening circle, a never-ending song, and you are doing exactly what you were meant to do. You are participating, with all your beautiful, messy, unfinished glory, in the ongoing creation of the world. Chapter 25. The perfect circle when the return is the beginning. We have walked a long path together through the fluorescent aisles of our own existential questions, through the thick forests of our patterns, and across the vast open plains of noble silence. We have dismantled the solid I, wrestled with the inner adversary, and learned to dance with the storms of change. And now, as we reach this final chapter, we find ourselves exactly where we began. But this is not a return to the start in the way a circle brings you back to the exact same point. It is a return to the marketplacito, the ordinary, messy, beautiful reality of daily life, with a vision that has been permanently altered. The supermarket aisle no longer feels like a place of existential dread. It is now just an aisle. The confusion you feel is no longer a bug in your life's operating system. It is a feature of your humanity. The perfect circle of awakening is the realization that the thing you were searching for, the peace, the authentic self, the ground of being, was never lost. It was simply obscured by the frantic, egoic need to be someone. You have traveled to the ends of the earth and back, only to find that the treasure was buried in the very soil where you first took your stand. Living this realization is the final, and perhaps most difficult, practice. It is the practice of radical mundanity. It is the ability to find the sacred in the coffee cup, the miracle in the breathing of your own lungs, and the profound wisdom in the simple act of being kind to a stranger. It is the recognition that enlightenment is not a special state reserved for mountaintops. It is the natural, unobstructed reality of this moment, right here, right now. As you close this book and step back into the flow of your own unique existence, remember the lessons we have curated. You are not a project to be finished. You are a mystery to be lived. Abandon the need for a final verdict on your worth. You are worthy because you exist. The spiral is your greatest ally. When you feel lost, do not panic. Recognize that you are simply passing a familiar landmark at a higher altitude. You are climbing, even when it feels like you are merely circling. Presence is the only medicine. Whenever the world tries to fragment your attention, return to your breath, return to the witness, return to the body. You are the architect of your own focus. Non-knowing is the gateway to truth. Keep your beginner's mind sharp. Stay curious, stay humble. Stay willing to be surprised by what life reveals to you. Next, you are entering the world again. But you are no longer the same person who began this reading. You are a person who knows how to hold space for the confusion, who knows how to invite the demons to tea, and who knows that even when the boat is empty, the river continues to flow toward the sea. There will be days when you forget all of this. There will be days when the actor takes over, when the verdict feels heavy, And when you feel completely adrift on those days, do not despair. That is simply the human rhythm. Take a breath, remember the feeling of the silence, and begin again. You do not need to be perfect, you only need to be present. The path is not a line drawn on the ground, it is the footprint you leave as you walk. And your walking, in all its uniqueness, is the contribution you are making to the tapestry of existence. You are a part of the whole, a note in the song, a reflection of the moon in the sky. Thank you for walking this path with me. The journey is not over, it has only just matured into its most honest phase. You are home. You have always been home. And now, with the weight of the search lifted from your shoulders, you are finally truly free to begin. Walk on.